And we are live. Hello. Hello. Welcome to Riffing with Ryan. I'm Rijon Erickson. Hello, hello. Good now, wherever and whenever you are. Today, I have in the studio behind me, waiting to come in and talk, are two gentlemen who I have for so long, wanted to have in the same place at the same time to see how they interact and what they wish to talk about. And today, I have here with me the inimitable, I'll tell you, they're both inimitable, Al Shalloway and Daniel Mezick. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi there.
Hey, hey, hey. Peace and long life. So, the topic today, we were dancing around a few topics that have flown about on LinkedIn and hither and thither and yon through the years about invitation and imposition and what that means and what's the point of why talk about that. And I know that the two of you have been having some other dialogue and that came to this theme that we have here today is creating engagement. Engagement is the word, and what we're grease is the word, but engagement is the word today. Um, so before we go into whatever we're going to go into about engagement, what it means, and so um, I would like we'll start with Al, since the letter A. In 2 words, who are you,
An educator and creator.
Daniel? Same to you. 2 words.
Creative troublemaker.
Creative troublemaker. All right. So the topic: creating engagement. Why should I care? Why should anybody care about engagement? Why does it matter?
I was thinking actually there might be a precursor question to that, and I'll tell you why. Because it actually has to do with how Dan and I got to here. So Dan's been a long time. I'm assuming most people have heard of him and me to some level. Dan's been this really big invitation. Don't impose. And we actually have some differences along this. I like invitation, and I think sometimes there are impositions though. But somewhere recently a I had a realization, Dan may have known this before, I'm slow sometimes, that what we were really talking about was engagement. He wants to invite and he wants to avoid imposition for engagement. Whereas I take a different approach, which is understanding, but it's still to get engagement. And that's the common theme. So I just kind of want to put that out on the table that there's the common theme of engagement. And then there is all these other things around it that might foster engagement that up until a week ago, I think Dan and I were looking at it differently. Now, not that we are in total agreement, but I think there's, hey, what can I say? We're more engaged because we're more in line. So that's another possible thing. So, Dan, I'm going to let you, since you've been carrying this torch for a lot longer than me, why don't you explain why? Why do you think engagement's important?
Well, Hal, I think you probably agree with me that, you know, probably had similar experience. I've never seen a high performance team than this. In fact, high levels of engagement seem to be very highly correlated with anything good that goes on whatsoever. So that's the reason why. And, as far as like my, public pronouncements, basically, the reason why I seem so some about this inviting thing is because, first of all, on social media, people quickly dilute the conversation down to some other deleted thing. So I've just been sort of like an invitation maximalist. To just get the basic idea out. Right. That's the whole purpose. And of course, engagement is the name of the game. So with that, that kind of gives you the picture. about where I stand and where things are at. And I want to say in general, I think that the Agile movement has missed the mark by not focusing on engagement from the beginning. Martin Fowler in 2006 wrote an essay called The Agile Innovating. He started, hold on, he was the first one to issue any kind of protective warning about forcing practices on teams without their consent. And that was ignored to this day. So in a way, we're talking about something that matters. Maybe you could have got involved in the conversation a lot sooner.
Yeah, I'm late. I'm slow sometimes. I should have. I actually uh kind of was reacting to some what are really wrinkles, and I shouldn't have reacted to, but I did. But anyway, we're engaged now. You said something that struck high performing teams. I agree. I've never seen a high performing team that wasn't engaged. And the way you can make non high performing teams better is to get them engaged. But when you look at high performing teams, what does high performing mean? And I think this illuminates what engagement means. So engagement doesn't just mean we're doing all this great stuff. Oh, we're working together. Oh, we're having a good time. If they're not producing value, if they're not innovating, if they're not both aligned with the organization and their stakeholders, customers, etc., then they're not fully engaged. So engagement is a very broad term. It doesn't mean busy, doesn't mean active. It means engaged in the reason we're supposed to be working, or the reason we're here. I don't know how you say that in French. The rate I can't remember. It sounds like a raisin.
Raison d'être.
Thank you. So I just want to broaden that because we haven't mentioned this before, but I would be willing to bet you agree with what I'm saying, that engagement means more than busy and talking to each other, but creating value for themselves, the organization, and the stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, being engaged means they're paying attention, right? And that you're actually, you're not looking in 18 different directions. You focus on the thing right here, right now, like the three of us. Right? So this is actually kind of an interesting thing because you don't build perception on what you don't pay attention. Or put it another way, you only build perception on what you pay attention. And there's a round of scientific data that supports this idea. There's a term called inattentional blindness. Have you ever heard of this term?
Well, I haven't heard the term, but it sounds like what Edgar Schein says. We don't think and talk about what we see. We only see what we're able to think and talk about. So it sounds consistent.
Yeah. So engaged teams are focused teams. They're focused on a specific goal. They usually have a shared goal. They know what that goal is. When you go and you ask the people, what is this team about? What's the purpose? What mission? What's the charter? You get the same answer from everyone from engaged. Everyone knows why they're there, right? And they're focused on it. But this whole idea, there's this nuance about engagement and invitation now. So, for example, you're my boss. Is it okay for you to tell me what to do? Absolutely, you're my boss, right? You're in authority over me. I accept directives from you as part of the deal of what the job is, and that's, I mean, that's not a big surprise. But the larger picture is that some typically high performing individuals want decision autonomy, or at least some of that kind of autonomy. And if you direct them too much, you will actually disengage them and actually maybe even build some form of resentment in them. So there's a very fine line here between being direct, which is, bosses or managers, right, for their job and the relationship with subordinate. And then on the other hand, do these people actually want this? Have we actually discussed that yet? Have we given them 10 good reasons why? Have we framed it as an experiment for them to inspect uh, together after a reasonable period of time? Have they been educated on like why it might be a good idea to work? Like, these kinds of things. We haven't heard any of that in the past 10 years from the Agile industry. The Agile industry assumed um, facts for that Agile practices are great. And if you do them, things will get better, either you like it or not. That's been the basic thing, or at least the implied, not explicit, but, in the absence of any protective warning otherwise, we're left to believe that forcing practices on team is just great. And it never was. And now we all found out the hard way. The industry is in a mess.
Yeah, I think the problem is, I think it's inherent somewhat in the way Agile has been positioned itself, that you had in the 80s, 90s. I mean, project management and a lot of times was really bad back then. And there was good project management too. This 100% painting project managers as horrible is not my experience. I've had bad ones, I've had good ones. And by good ones, I mean people who were very supportive and realized things changed and realized, hey, they're expecting it by then. How can we get there if we're running behind? And there are ways to do on time, on budget, and within um, on time, on budget, and the proper scope. But I'm not going to go there. But the point is that Agile, in many ways, was overreaction, in my opinion. When you talk about engagement, there are certain things you need to be aligned with the team. I mean, you have to have some agreement on how to make decisions,
Right.
how the team works together. Now, these need to be the team agreeing. I mean, this I'm not, or however, whatever structure there. But in Agile, there's a lot of disagreement on
Yeah.
what there is a way to move forward, kind of with a verified theory. I mean, I get a lot of flack for saying you can do this, and I've done it, so I know it's possible. I've taught other people to do it, so I know they can do it. It's not just me. It's not just my instincts.
Can do what?
To know if we're having troubles, how can we what can we look at to decide what to try next? I'm not saying that we all agree what it is, but the basis of it, like if you're building a bridge, there's certain things you attend to: elasticity, compression, gravity, weight, structures, all sorts of stuff. Now, software is not so easy. Product development is not so easy like that, but there are some things that work, and there should be an agreed upon attitude of how can we make decisions. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a minute. Okay. So if someone's making a decision, that is going to uh, cause them to pay attention,
That's right.
cause them to engage. Why? Because decisions have consequences, and consequences are engaging. So we can say that decisions are engaging. So a primary tool for bringing about more engagement at the individual team level is to have people make some decisions that makes them both responsible and accountable, right? So
Right.
if you're my boss and you tell me what to do, or you decide how I'm going to do something, I'm responsible, like you're accountable. So if I don't want to be accountable, I probably like it more if my boss Al tells me what the right approach is, or what the right thing to do is, or what the right decision. But if Al comes to me and says, "Dan, the outcome that we want is this: A, B, and C. You want A, B, and C to be the outcome. I'm leaving it up to you to figure out how A, B, and C can be a manufactured outcome from the work of your team." So that you decide. Okay, now I'm responsible and accountable. What's the difference? The difference between responsibility and accountability is that accountability comes with sanction. It comes with consequence, right? Responsibility doesn't necessarily come with consequence. So, for example, as a parent, I am responsible for my children. But if I put them in harm's way, I become accountable to the state. And there's sanctions if I put my children in harm's way, sanctions from the state. right? So I'm accountable to the state as a parent, to keep my children safe to a reasonable degree, right? And this crimes with names on them, like risk of injury to a minor, right? These are crimes that parents are accountable for if they don't execute properly on the responsibility of the parent. So responsibility and accountability, deciding comes with both, right? But being delegated to comes with just responsibility only. So this is part of the reason why I think decisions are very engaging, is because there's risk involved, right? In deciding correctly or incorrect. There's upside risk when I decide good, right? And there's downside risk when I decide bad. So decisions are super engaging, and every invitation is asking for a decision. Therefore, invitations are engaging. So what I say in the book, Inviting Leadership, is that you have to mix in some invitations with those delegations. It doesn't mean the delegation ends. It means you look for opportunities for people to volunteer, for people to say yes, for people to do it the way they want to do it. And if you do this within constraints, and all this is where the nuance comes in, um, everyone can get what they want. One of the things about disengaging people is the first people that disengage are the high performers who have options. By definition, the best people have options. That's what makes them the best people. They have options. So the best people are going to loiter by the exit if you piss them off. And the primary way to piss off a high performer is to uh, offer them a smaller set of decisions than they had yesterday.
Yeah, let me comment on a few things, and this might be an area of difference between us, but I'm not sure. So I agree with you. You want to push. This is a basic lean concept too. You want to push the working down to the people who are doing the work, the decisions rather down to the people who are doing the work. But there are a couple of factors that tend to get ignored. One of the things I've found in the agile space by a lot of thought leaders, actually, it's not anything to do with experience. It's more to do with your approach, I think, in life, is we're very binary. In fact, Don Reinertson and hey, at a conference where I remember this was like, I don't know, a long time ago, 15 years ago, we're at a conference and some people were talking Kanban, some people were talking Scrum, some people were talking this model of complexity, some people were talking that model of complexity. And it was just back and forth. It was very tiring because it was the extreme case. And he turns over to me and he says, these people have been around ones and zeros too long. I just broke out laughing because that's exactly what it was this or that. So it's not this or that, though. There's always fine things in the middle. And one of the things about trust, if I'm with somebody and they all of a sudden need what is it when you have to, they're blocked and you have to put a hole in the larynx or something so they can breathe. You can trust me to do my best, and you can also figure you're going to die because I have no idea how to do that. Okay. So there's a difference between trusting a person as being motivated and trusting a person as capable. And capability, when you're talking about decisions down at the Gemba, as it's called, down where the work takes place, has three pieces to it at a minimum. One is, are they positioned to get their job done? The other one is, do they understand the technology or, if they're in a position where they can do it? The second one is, do they have the knowledge of what to do? And the third one, which is often ignored, is do they have the decision rules that they should be using? Now, Don Reinertson talks about it in his book. I consider it a seminal book and highly recommend it. Principles of Product Development Flow, Second Generation Lean Product Development. And he talks about this with three of his rules. I'm not going to go through them all, but if you want to find them, just look for the 777. 777. I mean, Boeing's having some troubles now, but back in the day, they were an amazing airplane manufacturer. And with the 777, they did a lot of intelligent things. And one of them was they had a decision rule. Like, in other words, if they knew the plane was designed across the organization and you wanted developers, engineers in this case, to figure out what to do, You needed to make sure they knew what the decision rules were. What's the trade-off of cost, weight, fuel consumption, different things like that.
Well, now, can you define decision role? What do you mean, like,
Rule, RULE, the
oh,
decision rule.
oh, decision role?
So one of them was to use decision roles to decentralize economic control. In other words, look, here's how we need to make the decisions. Now, you down at the working area, now you can use these for that. And then he had a couple others. Another one was control the economic logic behind the decision. If there's economics behind this, like how much, if you can cut a pound off the plane, how much is that worth? Um, the point is, it's not like to go through this. I'll mention the third since I mentioned there are three. Disseminate key information widely. So you say, here are the rules. Here's the information. Here's how it gets disseminated. The point is this. Point's this. One of the roles of management is not just to make a great environment, is not just to empower the teams. It's to make sure the teams know how to work on what we're trying to do. And now this increases engagement because now within this parameter set, they can be creative, they can be innovative, they can even challenge the parameter set. Because very often managers will give the wrong parameter set. In fact, that's where great consultants work well, is when they challenge the parameter set because the constraints given weren't good constraints. But you need a conversation about it. You can't just go off and do it on your own. And this is where I say engagement doesn't mean no constraints, but it means constraints in a way that increases engagement.
Right. Well, just you're bringing up constraints at the topic. That's a really interesting topic. So in any game, there's a rule set. You made reference to rules, decision rules. And those rules can be thought of as constraints, right? So in golf, we address the ball with a golf glove. We do not fire it out of a gun, right? So that's a constraint. It's also the hole is so wide. I think it's 3 inches across or whatever it is. That's another constraint, right? If the hole was wider, it would be easier to take putts. But because it's the size that it is, a lot of putts get missed. And if you want to play golf, you're agreeing to play within those constraints. So this thing from a leadership and management point of view is about constraint design, right? It's about constraint definition and management. So this is actually something that causes people to be creative constraints. And if there's a complete lack of constraint, then there's no reason to be creative. So for example, if you have unlimited money, we know from economics that a free good generates infinite demand. And we'll spend it all because of course you don't give a damn about how much we spend because we have an unlimited amount of money. But you have a budget, that's a constraint. Now you got to get conservative, or you got to get creative. How I want to enjoy a dinner. Should I go for the hamburger or the filet mignon? So when you have a limited amount of money, then time or whatever the resources, you have to be much more creative. So constraints actually generate creativity, and they're necessary. So there's a lot of nuance around this invitation thing that I've hammered over the year. I just haven't been willing to get into the nuance because a lot of the core message would get lost in translation if we started talking about all the nuanced situations where invitation doesn't. So I want to raise this topic as a thing. When does invitation make no sense? Okay, here's one. Companies facing an existential threat and will be done in a year if we don't do something radically different. That would be a reason for delegation, for direction, and for a from authority to the next level mandates. Like, totally yes. However, I can't think of many other examples where imposing makes a whole bunch of sense without them choosing.
Yeah, but
So,
I'm sorry, finish. I thought you were
Oh,
done.
go ahead. So please
No,
tell me,
you
is
bring
that
up an
something?
interesting situation here, and and I want to make a point about it. Let's say you're in this situation. We've got to go this way. I remember one company I consulted with that brought me in because they were having troubles. They were using COBOL. They needed to learn how to do object-oriented COBOL. Believe it or not, there is such a thing. This is a ways back too. And the problem is the system was degrading. I mean, the code quality was horrible, changes were horrible, and they were in a state-regulated environment, which meant if they couldn't keep up with the need of the changes, they literally could not operate. So everybody knew that they had about a year to survive at the rate they were going. I mean, I don't know that everybody knew how bad it was, but I talked to the CEO about this. I said, look, you have to stop adding features. You have to get back into compliance with the state agent, or not back into, but you got to make sure you don't fall out of it. Now, the mandate that happened out of that was we're not adding features, we're improving our system so we can just accept regulatory changes. So that is an example. But now let's talk about it even after that has been done. Now, however, we want the ideas of people engaged to be there. We want people to have choice within those constraints. So,
Right. I like that.
yeah, there are constraints. See, when you talk about constraints, I like the word looking at constraints rather than being forced, because one constraint, like I had at Net Objectives, one of the constraints I had was that you could never do anything that wasn't in the best interest of the client. And if it wasn't in the best interest for us as well, then we would disengage. But there were times when clients asked us to do things that were in their best interest. They thought it was a good idea. Like I remember one client that wanted us to teach them a test planning course, which I didn't know what they meant. But when I found out, I said, that's the worst thing you can do. You don't want to plan your tests ahead of time. You want testers to be working with developers, not separated. So we walked away from that. And there were times, and that was like a constraint. People had to abide by that in the company. But within that, they could do whatever they wanted to. So constraints are kind of guidance that's set. And when you agree to work for a company,
Exactly.
you agree to those constraints. But that doesn't give the manager the right to tell you how to do the work. Although
Well,
they could verify what you're doing. I do believe in great visibility. It's not micromanage, but it's visibility. That's important.
thanks. Yeah, but listen, if I'm working in an insurance company, the reason why I'm working there instead of a startup, because I want a 9 to 5 job. And then on the weekend, I want to go on my big hunting boat and I want to go fishing for bluefin. Right. I want to just put that away and I want to get my boat in the water. Okay. Or go down to the marina and fire up the twin outboards and get out on Long Island Sound, right? Where I belong. So in that type of a job, what I really want is someone to tell me what to do so I can do it. I'll be responsible, you be accountable, and everything will be great. Okay. Now, what happens is the business change, and now we need people that are accountable as well as responsible, because there's demands and pressure on the business. So this whole thing about everyone wants autonomy. No, some people don't. So people just want to know what to do so they can leave on Friday and get out of the boat and go fishing for bluefin in Long Island. So this actually a problem, because if I'm that kind of person, I don't really want to be totally engaged. Okay. What I really want to do is come and do my job. I want to be responsible. But I don't want to get too invested in it. I just want to come and do my job and collect my paycheck and go home. And there's a lot of people like that in the world. But the way the world is changing today, unless there's a obscenely profitable business model, we need engaged people to actually be viable and save money.
Yeah.
So how do we engage them? I guess my summary is put them on a decision or a series of decisions. And the easiest way to do that is to invite them to decide, because the invitation itself contains an embedded decision inside of it that's going to engage people. So that's where I stand on the thing. I think engagement is essential. I don't care how you get it. Al, you and I talked about how you use education and teaching as a way of engaging people. Maybe before we finish up, you'd like to say a few things about that.
Yeah, the education is what I'm trying to do is get engaged via understanding, and then I use education and support tools. So uh, now I believe, well, Ellie Goldratt says that in a nutshell. He says a comfort zone has less to do with control and more to do with understanding. And by that he means that when you don't have understanding, then you go back to old habits. And that if managers are used to command and control, then when they don't understand, they're going to do command and control. When you don't understand, you're going to have fear. And when you have fear, you don't get much engagement because there's fear of the engagement itself, fear of taking charge of things. So my belief is we can understand things. Now, this seems to be in the minority. I don't know. I've never seen surveys of this, but I get a lot of flack. I remember years ago, I wrote this thing I call factors for effective value streams, which are based on what I call first principles. Like I know multitasking is a bad thing. Working beyond your capacity causes multitasking. Delays in your workflow is bad. There are about a dozen, there are hundreds of them, but there are about 10. I've distilled it down to like a Pareto analysis. And from those, I came up with a set of another 10 things I call factors for effective value streams, which helps you make decisions. Now, I know we're in a complex environment. I know that there's complexity in knowledge work. Not that the domain is 100% though complex. Some of it is simple, some of it's complicated, some of it is just you can't see what's going on because it's so much. But these underlying things are always present. And if you understand them, you get engaged because you can work as a group to say, how can we make a better decision going forward, knowing one of two things is going to happen. One, we will get improvement because it's following these rules, or there's something we don't see, and blindside us. Now, if the second thing happens, now we can say, oh, there's something we don't see, or we didn't see. We see it now because it's that. See, that's learning. So there is an approach you can take that says, I don't have to just throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. I can take an intelligible way of moving forward with theory that's been verified by everybody working together. And that's engaging because now you're engaging with a problem, you're engaging with each other. But you have to understand these things. And for whatever reason, a lot of people tend to say, no, that's not possible, which is interesting to me. It's ironic because they're saying it's not possible as a theory, and I've got evidence it's possible, not just me doing this. This is basically the core, the foundation of Amplio University. And I want to say one other thing on this. There's an example of this that is important that actually is, I hadn't even thought about it as an engagement thing. So there's this guy, Ignaz Semmelweis, in 1847, I think it was. And he was Austrian, and he was in charge of two hospitals. And these were both maternity hospitals. And one was for the well-to-do, and one was for the not well-to-do, vagrants. Anybody could come into this. And there was, I think it was puerperal fever. There was a kind of post-maternity illness where almost nobody died in the free clinic, and there was a high mortality rate, 18% or something. I can't remember exactly. In the high class one. In fact, people who had money would pretend they didn't, not to save the money, but to get into the hospital where people didn't die when they had babies. And he wondered what was going on. And I'll cut this long story short. He figured out what it was. This was before Pasteur. Nobody knew what germs were. Nobody even talked about germs. And he had this thought because the teaching hospital, place people were dying was in the expensive teaching hospitals where they taught doctors. So they did autopsies. And back in the day, they washed their hands. There wasn't blood and gore on their hands, but they weren't using disinfectant. And somehow he figured out there's a logical process he followed. Basically, he noticed that when he was not in town, people didn't die. And when he was in town, they did die. And he knew he wasn't killing them. So it had to be the teaching. So he made this theory. People are dying because there's somehow a connection between the autopsies and the maternity. And what happened is, yes, thanks. What happened is he came up with some disinfected method with lye, and why he thought it would work, who knows? But it did work. He had data. He had data for it. He had no theory for the data. Doctors would not agree with him. The administrators would not agree with him. They didn't do this, even though he dropped the mortality rate.
Yeah.
So you don't get engagement when you don't understand. That's a key thing. And you usually need some sort of binds it together that you can chat about.
If what you're talking about there is that this fellow figured out that it had something to do with hand washing, and nobody believed them because
Why?
they didn't understand.
Yeah, they didn't understand because there was no germ theory. Later, when Pasteur came out with germ theory, oh, Ignaz knew something. Unfortunately, he'd already passed away.
Right.
Um,
Right.
It's a great story. It's why theory is important. I actually have an article on this, why theory is important, when I talk about Semmelweis. And you see this all the time. I go into companies all the time, and they are trying and struggling with what are really simple things, but it's not simple to them. And they accept it because, well, it's complex. We're a complex domain. What can we do? And the reason is, well, there's no such thing as a complex domain in my mind. Domains are about the relationships between the things, and some are simple, some not, some are complex. But this is engagement, understanding how things are, or being willing to talk about it is all it takes. You don't have to all agree, but when you've got dogma, when people say, "Oh, you're lying," or "Oh, you're just a blind squirrel who found the nut," those are comments I get.
Right. Right. Right.
That disengages things. People shut down their learning. Dogma is a killer. That's the big thing in Agile right now. There's a lot of
Yeah.
dogma.
I agree. I agree with that. Brian, go ahead, man.
So I wanted to bring a couple comments. We had a few comments in here that have maybe bring us back a little bit. One from
Yeah,
Jim
and I wanted
Benson.
Jim. I noticed Jim's. I wanted to answer that.
All right.
Actually, I wanted to know what he meant. Yeah, they're good. What do you mean by protected mode? That
Isolation, it sounds like.
is that what you mean, Jim?
Okay, we'll see if he's on LinkedIn, so I won't get the comment quite as quickly
Okay.
as I would
In a
want
high
to.
performance team, I think highly engaged teams like to be engaged with other teams. They don't work in isolation. Oh, I got it. That's right. Protected mode. If you have teams that are not engaging with each other, you have a major problem. And this is actually one of the reasons people have trouble scaling Agile, which you should not be doing anyway. I believe you start with the whole and you figure out how to implement it. It could be part of it, but you always take the holistic thing. One thing I discovered back, oh, I don't know, almost 20 years ago was that successful Scrum implementations often kill the company's Agile. And I say Scrum, not to pick on Scrum. Any team implementation would do it, but Scrum was what was around 15, 20 years ago. And what happened was this: you would teach it, you would get all the best people on a Scrum team to verify that it's working. But what you didn't do is you actually made everybody else a little worse because all your best people are here. And they worked in one way and everybody else worked another way. And basically you solved the team problem, making the inter-team problem worse. And they like
You're talking about local optimization.
local
from the
optimization.
system.
Team
Yeah.
local optimization can disengage teams from each other. But now what I also see, even when you don't do that, a team starts doing it. You might have team A, B, and C, and team A gets really good with Scrum. Man, they are rocking. But now when you want to look at the product that's A, B, and C, there's another kind of local optimization. A needs to slow down to help B and C so the whole group can get stuff done. Why do they want to slow down? We just learned Scrum, man. We're doing rocking. So when you train people in these protected islands, you're basically creating agile silos, which is ironic. It's an oxymoronic statement. I know, but that's what you're doing. So anyway, that addresses what Jim was saying. I hope.
There's one thing I want to get inside with before this.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I know we have to go, 10 or 15 minutes, but for the people who are listening and the people who are this afterward, you know, agility is not just software agility. Businesses find themselves in a complex situation, very similar to software engineering team, and they're looking to bring some agility to what they do. Here's what I found with business agility teams that are not involved in software, or even if there is a software or hardware, they basically have no appetite for terminology, training, or theory, right? So the three T. They have no interest in that. What they really want is desired outcome, and they want them like as soon as possible or sooner. So the way that I like to do this is I like to say, okay, fine, let's do this. And I lay out a couple of, like an initial sort of design for doing work in a different way. And key to this is that we will inspect this new way of working. We will inspect the new process after a reasonable period of experience, and we will drop it like a bad habit if it's no longer working, or if it's working but not as well as we like, we'll amend it and we'll do something different, better, more. We'll make an adjustment. We'll pivot. So when the people who are not interested or naysayers, they kind of sharpen their knife for the coming referendum in 3 or 4 weeks on the new process. But between now and when we have a referendum, they get a surprise, which is desired outcomes begin to manifest, something nobody expected. Who was a naysayer, who was skeptical, who were sharpening their knives for the referendum. So now there's this dissonance, right? We're going to go into the referendum, and actually the referendum is going to say, hey, we're generating outcomes more in line with what we actually want. In some cases, it's happening faster and more predictable. Like, hey, who knew? Okay. So a couple of things happen here. The enthusiastic skeptics, we'll call them, the energetic skeptics, right? They have this dissonance now. They're like, what WTF? What is this? Right. So all of a sudden they realize there might be something here. So we win the skeptics over. Other thing that happens is we don't alienate the high performers because they're going to get a hearing and they're going to pivot and they're going to adjust and they're going to change things and make it better after the referendum period, right? So we give it a chance to work. We don't alienate the best performers by forcing them to do it, right? We ask them to do it as an experimental thing, something we're going to try, something we're going to amend, right? And they go for that, right? So you retain the best people, everyone's choosing. The skeptics have a dissonant experience if we deliver the goods at the end. And if we haven't, during the trial period, deliver the goods, well, then we fully expect to be led in a courteous way to the exit door as the coach. Because what we're doing is just not working, but we have the goods as a coach. So the basic model is, do you want to improve? Yes. Are you willing to do something new for 3 or 4 weeks to improve? Yes. Okay. For this to work, you have to believe everything I say is true. Do it the way I tell you to do it. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, we'll have a referendum. That seems to fly. And is it directive? Yeah, we could say it's directive. Why?
Well,
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 I
I
could.
think,
Oh, I'm sorry. You go, Ryan. Then I
you
want
know,
to
it's a good,
amplify something he said.
well, I think this goes into the core game theory that you talk about a lot, that the 4-part game theory, right? Do we have a goal? Get better in the way that happening. We have a set of rules, or hey, trust me, you're going to trust me that we're going to do these things in this way. Now,
You're going to pretend everything I say is true. You're going to act as if.
and then you have the period of time, the progress, and then at this hope, are you in? Right at the invitation at the end. Okay, and then that's the inspection.
Oh, there's an invitation at the beginning too.
Yeah. Now, here's the comment I want to make, Dan. I want to make sure we're not seeing ones and zeros too much. And I don't think we are. I'm making a pun. So I'm talking about understanding. You're talking now about experimentation. You can do both, because if, say, you are in the situation you're in and you're saying, okay, we're going to try this for 3 or 4 weeks, but let's talk about why we think this might work.
Yeah.
I know you didn't mean to exclude that. I'm just saying
No, not at all.
it's
No.
a combination of understanding and experimentation. Okay, we're not really sure this is going to work, because I'll tell you this. I'll give an example of where I do this. So I know what ideally a good value creation structure. Team topologies has gotten to be a common term, but I like Neil's phrase value creation structure better. So that's what I've used, how people are organized. Now, the problem is this. This is way too difficult to figure out. You can always do a little bit that you can understand. In other words, I go in, I can see some things, man, that's going to work. There's no question about it. But there's a lot of stuff you can't. It's just too complex. There are too many things going on. So in this case, you could say, well, here is ideally what we'd like to see, fewer dependencies, more cross functionality, things like that. And we can see these things will help. Beyond that, we can't see. So the change has to be more emergent. We do a little bit, see what happens, do a little bit, see what happens. And this do a little bit, see what happens, do a little bit, see what happens. If we know what to look for, can be done in a matter of a week or two, not several, not the time frame of
Right.
experimenting.
All right.
So it's still doing what you're saying, but let's take smaller steps. Let's do some understanding, some faith. And you can also lower the J curve this way. Everybody talks about you always have to get worse. That's wrong. See, I love Virginia Satir. I think the J curve and her whole model is brilliant, but we're not doing family therapy, although it feels like that sometimes. And there is that aspect of it in knowledge work, working with people. But if people are doing something wrong, the immediate effect is often there. I've written up several case studies where literally, one case study I talk about where we did some value stream analysis and we found the root cause of about a 20% loss of a 100-person development team. They fixed in an hour. Why? Because they were doing something wrong that nobody noticed because were sure what the cause was. And we did value stream analysis. We discovered the cause was also somewhere else. Fixing a hole in the boat will help, even if there are other holes. Now, you might want to know which one to fix. But here's a question for you, because this just crossed my mind as maybe the conversation here. See, I find the biggest problem I'm having is getting people to realize that Agile's not nearly as hard as people have bought into. It's hard because it's incredibly incomplete, focuses on the wrong thing, and actually tells us things that we can and need to do aren't possible. That's, I think, the biggest problem. So now here's my question, and I hadn't thought about this before. I think there's a relationship between engagement and taking on what I just said, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that you need to be engaged is safety. So the question could be, is there a way by focusing on safety and engagement, people are then more willing to say, hey, maybe the boundaries, the constraints we've been living on aren't real. Maybe I'm sorry, what?
Define safety.
Safety would be to be able to make decisions that were not effective without repercussions to the person making them.
Yeah. So basically a safe fail decision.
Yeah, a safe to fail. And there are ways to do that. Also, you should always make safe to fail decisions that can be reverted. So in other words, if you make a decision you can't walk off, that's a problem. Because if you're wrong, but it's also even if you make a safe to fail decision, management can hold it against you. Oh, this guy's always making bad decisions. That's safe to fail, but you're losing your status if you do those too many times. So safe to fail both for the work and for the individual.
Yep.
Yeah. So here's it's not a question like an answer. It's a question like I'm going to keep asking myself. I believe that some of the requirements for engagement are the same ones for innovative thinking. In other words, to notice that I don't know, to acknowledge I don't know. There's so much more stuff I don't know than I do know.
Yeah. But nobody problem with that in most organizations now that people are allergic to uncertainty, managers and decision makers in particular. So this is a problem, right? So basically, we do it like this. I am promising the results that you're seeking. I'll need a reasonable period of time to generate those results. So like, when do we do this? And if it doesn't fly, then you can politely show me to it. And it can be as little as 2 weeks, like 1 week sprint is what I'm doing with these business agility teams.
This reminds me of the Dilbert, where somebody brings up the question of, well, what happens if that doesn't work? Is there any risk? And it shows Dogbert, the consultant Dogbert, looking through the contract stuff. No risk. I get paid either way.
Yeah, exactly. No, I want to say something else to the people that are listening. So the in general, this agile industry thing has generated mega invoices of training and big bang training and big bang consulting by selling the idea that we can both transform dozens of teams by A, putting them through a whole bunch of training, and then B, having them work in iterations and develop backlog. And that's been great for generating, payable invoices attached to a big content PO. Okay. But it hasn't been good for getting better results and what you might call transformation. So big bang training followed by big bang coaching is actually great for transaction, but it's really bad for transformation.
Right.
So this has been the modus operandi of the agile industry for like a year. And there hasn't been a single thing set against it because, the purpose of a system is that it's not. And what the agile industry is particularly good at of the system is generating, the hunting invoice, right?
I have to interrupt you. I have been railing against this for 15 years, and it's why I've made a lot of enemies because I think the whole thing is set up to get more training, more consulting, be less, do all that. And I don't agree with that.
It's
Anyway,
completely antithetical to the learning theories that we know are effective.
they are. If you know anything about curriculum, the whole certification treadmill does absolutely everything wrong. And gaming theory just makes it entertaining to be doing the wrong thing in those courses. Anyway, sorry, Dan, I just had to throw that in, but go ahead.
Yeah. So the purpose of the system is what it does. And apparently the purpose of the agile industry is to maximize revenue.
So it's really good. It's more alive than ever. It's maybe getting a little ill, but I'm sorry. Sorry, the sarcastic part of me couldn't help
It's
myself.
good. It's good. And then, Ryan, what you were saying, game theory. Now, game theory is a thing that's based on John Nash, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about four-part game description or game definition that was defined by Jane McGonigal in her book Reality is Broken on page 42. And in that book, she did the world a great service where she was able to provide a concise, elegant, simple definition of what a game is that applies to any game you could possibly play, from poker to, um, volleyball to golf or whatever. Games have goals. Games have rules or constraints. Games have a way to track progress. So goals, rules, and progress tracking. And the fourth one, opt-in participation. If you're compelled to play, it's not a good game. So, the agile world has had clear goals, clear constraints, and clear ways to track progress. But where it's really fallen down is in the fourth parameter of a good game, which is opt-in participation. People have been compelled to do this agile stuff. And if you look up like on Google, agile is bullshit, you get like 1 million entries of agile is bullshit. Because people are like, this is lunacy. And that's because it's poor. So we've done something kind of dumb. But whatever happens is the only thing that can happen. And when it's over, it's over. So that brings me to this whole concept of open space. Now, Al, you and I were talking about freedom within constraints before. You can have constraints. Constraints make a bounded container. Within the container, there's degrees of freedom. And that's good. And that gives an opportunity for creativity and this kind of thing. I found that using open space in organizations is a great way to bring about intended outcomes and improvement by getting everyone engaged and answering the question, how do we improve? Right. And the authority figures can actually provide the constraints ahead of time about what it is that we're shooting at, and what the money, time, and other constraints are. And then within that, there's degrees of freedom that we discuss in open space. So I have often wondered why the agile community does open space events and conferences routinely. Yet for some reason that I can't understand, open space never finds its way into organizational change.
Because it's not open space. It is not open space. They're unconferences. You talk about open space technology. There are input criteria to open space technology,
Yeah.
right? It is the business issue that's a burning issue that people have passion about, want to take responsibility for. If nobody cares, uh, you know, nobody comes. If there's no responsibility, nothing happens.
Yeah.
And then there's complexity, which we talked about, diversity of opinion, no one answer. And what do you think? A deadline of yesterday, right? So the four input criteria plus the bounding issue and passion responsibility, is that there at a conference? Hell
No,
no, it's
it's
not there.
not there at the conference, but my question is, why hasn't like the institutions or the so-called thought leader promoted the idea of using open space, which is a self-organized thing, which is focused on people, which is completely aligned 100% with Agile principle, right? How come open space hasn't become the standard way or a standard item in the way of getting positive outcomes going through the use of
Well,
Agile practices?
I have been running into this uh, for the last 3 years since I left the PMI, working on this new way of doing training and this new content. It's more affordable, more effective, more convenient. And why has it not caught on? And now there are a lot of reasons. One of which is it hasn't really come together till the last few months. I've been learning this. Plus, some of it's been admittedly my sometimes antagonistic attitude, which has thankfully gone away, although I'm not sure people noticed it.
Yeah, you're antagonistic.
Sometimes.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I know. But you had a big I want to thank you again publicly. Your comments when we had that conversation a week ago has just totally shifted me in so many ways. I just really, really appreciate it. But here's the third thing. I don't mean to be antagonistic, but what I'm doing is challenging people's ideas, which people will take as antagonistic. So that's the problem. And that's why Stories 10X that you recommended helped me so much. I was, I'm not trying to make them wrong, but I am because I'm saying they're doing something wrong, or they'll even perceive they're doing something wrong when I'm not saying that. But the third thing is most people don't really want to take the risk of being responsible for what they do. This is why things like Scrum and Safe and even Kanban now has got, I'll go with that because that works. Now I saw this one, my first job outside of university was with IBM. And this was in the 70s. 77 is when I started working at IBM. And it was Big Blue then. You bought mainframes from them. And nobody got fired for going with IBM. You could get fired if I forget the other company, General something or other. They were cheaper, they were faster, they were better, but they were a risk to your career if something went wrong. People don't like risk. So the way Agile has gotten, in my opinion, to be so widespread is it's actually fed this fear. We don't know what's going on. Look at how much we talk about it's complex and it's not simple. Even the mantra simple to understand, difficult to master is like, what? I don't want something simple to understand and difficult to master. I want something that's simple to understand and easy to master. Is that possible? Why are we settling for anything short of that? And yet when you ask that question, people think it's not possible. Well, it just takes a lot of work. The thing is, look at a Tesla versus a or any EV. I don't want to get political here, but an EV versus the Model T years ago, or the Model A, or any of those. They're way more complicated, very complex. Simple to use. You get in, you push a button, you go. In fact,
Which,
sometimes
which,
it's more
which one's complex? The Model T or the
I'm sorry, what?
which one is complex?
Oh, the modern cars today are complexly built, but very simple to use.
Oh, yeah.
See, how you build it and how you use it are two different things.
Right.
But if people, this is why understanding is so important in my mind. But I love what you're saying in this other part of it. It's engagement we want. What would be interesting is to do, and I'd kind of like to do this. I think we should get back in about a month where we've done an analysis of factors for engagement. Like I have factors for effective value streams, and until you do these things, we hit a lot of them.
Yeah.
Understanding, invitation, experimentation, safety. But we should make a model of engagement. Open technology is a way to manifest all this, open space technology.
Take,
I think that would be interesting.
Yes, and executives need to understand if you want to bring change, engagement is essential. So
That's right.
the question is, how do you get it? So if somebody's coming in and going, "Oh, I can help you make things change the way you want. Oh, you want this, this, and this? Yeah, I can do that." It's Big Bang training followed by Big Bang consult. And the question from the executive should be, then people have to be engaged for any of the shift work. That's the question that executives need to be asking. That's the question they haven't asked for the past 10 years. And the Agile industry has gotten away with it. Right. But if they ask, begs the question, if engagement is essential, what is your engagement model?
Yeah,
What is
I
your
like it because I think executives will appreciate that. The ways to lower risk, ways to add value, ways to increase engagement is something they could hear. See, they don't hear, "Oh, I want to invite people."
no,
I'm not saying it's wrong, but they don't hear that. They will hear, "We want engaged people."
well, reduce risk or by increasing engagement.
Absolutely.
Here's the risk to reduce. And here's the technique for getting there. So
Yeah,
most of these consulting firms don't have an answer to the question, what's your engagement model?
I love it. I love it. What's your engagement model? That's so
And
do
I
you
think
have
this,
one already built then?
of course you do, Dan. I know what
Well,
it is. I would offer one other thing.
can
I
you
think
put
this
it in
also
the
ties.
URL so I can look at it?
Well, it is the
Oh, no, I
openspaceagility.com.
need something really clean and short, not just, like on a page.
Well, I would bring up the one sheet for OSA as
Okay,
well,
I'm
but
looking at it right now.
um,
Okay. I guess you could say that. So
the thing that I think, Dan, you bring this in the Inviting Leadership book, and it's the Ready for Agile checklist, right? To have this common language around what does Agile mean, what does Kanban mean, what does Scrum mean, and I think what is missing, and even really in this conversation, I don't think we ever really agreed on what engagement means, have a shared understanding of that. And I think if the organization is going to always say engage, well, what do you mean by that?
what do you mean
Well,
by that?
I'll tell you what they mean because the numbers that get measured and are popularized by Gallup, they don't really have anything to do with what the two of you guys are talking about. They're
Really?
measuring something completely different, and that talk about a consulting complex, right? Then Gallup gets sold in through another tower, and then we measure the engagement because of these 12 questions that they have, and they're completely siloed and not communicating with what wants to happen in the software world. So I think that that's another piece of this sponsorship puzzle that there needs to be shared
Yeah,
understanding
yeah,
when you're in the invitation phase.
All right. Hey guys, we're kind of over time here.
yeah,
We are, but I didn't wanna stop when you were on a riff there,
yeah.
Dan. So yet we are at a little bit past the top of the hour. I wanna thank you both for coming in here. I would be delighted to have you back in another month, kind of have you cogitated on this. Um, to close, uh, I'll go to you first. What in one sentence would be your invitation to the folks out here in the audience to say, um, what if you did this? What would be your invitation?
I think people need to be more open to a lot more as possible than what is accepted in the industry. And when somebody presents something to you that expands on it, you don't believe it. I don't believe in ever believing what anybody else says, but dispel disbelief and ask, why not? Why not is this possible? What is my belief that has this not be possible? And question your beliefs about why those beliefs may not be there. I find that people are self limiting. They're not engaged, to make a pun. They're not engaged with learning what their self imposed limitations are. Start engaging with those. See why. Get
Start
rid of them.
engaging. Fantastic. Dan, what would you say is your invitation to our audience?
I would say that if the engagement is essential, and it is, what are you doing about generating more of it day to day in your
Yeah, that's great.
Yes. Right, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time and attention here, and for those of you out there in the universe, wherever you are, whenever you are, thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention. So, see y'all
Thanks.
later next time. Maybe in a month or